First of all, welcome to this conference, both those who are present with us physically and also those who have joined us virtually. One may ask, what is the use of the conference today? The relationship between ethics and business and its various dynamics is a subject which in Malta received considerable attention because of the events we all have experienced. The COVID-19 pandemic has put further emphasis on the important role of business in creating jobs and aiding a sustainable recovery for us all. Now, more than ever, we need to find ways not to cut corners, but to ensure that the recovery and the economic impact that is generated benefits all. The question that we posed to ourselves at the Chamber when we were formulating the subject of this conference, and which will be the main topic for today's discussion, was: is there an ethical way of doing business? The conference today should serve as an initial point of discussion on such an important subject. We chose Pope Francis as he is a universal figure who spoke various times about this topic and therefore unites us all in discussing such an important subject. I would like to thank the Diocese of Gozo, the Foundation Centesimus Annus Pro Pontifice, and Bank of Valletta, who have accepted our invitation to partner with us on this important discussion. We really have an excellent array of speakers today: Joseph F. Zahra, Mario Galea, Dr. Gordon Cordina, and Fr Joseph Hili. The first three need no introduction. All are involved extensively in the business scenario and will surely provide useful insights to us all, given their vast experience on the subject. Fr Joseph Hili is a member of the Center for the Anthropology of Religion and Cultural Change in the Università Cattolica of Milan. I am sure all the speakers will provide us with extensive food for thought on the subject. Beginning our discussion today, I would like to take the cue from Pope Francis' message that he conveyed for an event in Argentina that tried to find sustainable solutions to business development while safeguarding the dignity and rights of workers and their families. In his message, he highlights the noble vocation of the entrepreneur that with creativity tries to produce wealth and diversify production, while at the same time creating jobs. This means that business people have an important role to play in society. However, the main purpose should be the common good. We hope that this conference will initiate an important dialogue between various parts of society. To this end, I would like to welcome the President of the Gozo Business Chamber, Joseph Borch, to make his initial remarks.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, Excellency, dear friends. In my intervention on the 20th anniversary celebration of the Gozo Business Chamber nearly 2 years ago, on the 10th January 2020, I had indicated the importance of ethics in business and how, as a chamber, we were committed to organize an event on this topic for our members. In the meantime, COVID-19 struck, and today I am happy that we are here in your presence and that as a chamber we have managed to organize this event in collaboration with all our partners on this initiative. But more important than that, I had highlighted during that event how business cannot detach itself from morality to achieve the common good. My intervention at that time was motivated from what we were observing. The unfolding of events over the past 2 years have made this conference a necessity now, more than ever before. And what better scenario to discuss this topic than Pope Francis' teaching itself? Pope Francis has spoken many times on the topic of business and how business people need to work intently to do good to society as a whole and not to a selected few. He does not disdain business, which he sees as a vocation, but rather for him, business needs to work transparently to benefit everyone. On the 26th May 2018, in his address to the Congress members participants of the Centesimus Annus Pro Pontifice Foundation, he had denounced the false dichotomy between business behavior and an ethics centered on the search of the common good. I quote, "There is a natural circularity between profit and social responsibility. There is, in fact, an indissoluble connection between an ethics respectful of persons and the common good, and the actual functionality of every economic financial system. In a word, the ethical dimension of social and economic interaction cannot be imported into social life and activity from without, but must arise from within. This is, of course, a long-term goal requiring the commitment of all persons and institutions within society," unquote. I believe that this conference should be the beginning of a dialogue between various persons and institutions within society. Labeling all business people as corrupt because of the behavior of a small number of business people is not acceptable. Instead, we should be answering questions such as, what is leading society to accept certain forms of behavior without an ethical consideration? What is motivating us to do business? How do we act to achieve business models that benefit the common good? The current situation, both locally and globally, calls for a deep reflection on many fronts. I sincerely hope that this event is just the beginning of an open and sincere dialogue between the many sectors that interact within society. Only last Saturday, together with other members of the Centesimus Annus Foundation, I heard Pope Francis offer the following words of encouragement. "Dear friends," he stated, "in promoting these values and this way of living, we often find ourselves going against the grain. Yet, let us always remember that we are not alone." I would like to thank all our partners on this event, the Diocese of Gozo, the Centesimus Annus Pro Pontifice Foundation, and Bank of Valletta, who have accepted our invitation to join us on this important discussion. I not only hope, but I am sure that this conference will bear fruit not only now, but also in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Joseph, for this introduction. Our conference will be structured as follows. Joseph F. Zahra will deliver the keynote speech. Our three panelists will then react to his intervention. Afterwards, we will be taking questions both from the floor, online, and also those who would like to leave a question on our social media. Joseph F. Zahra is an economist by profession, and he has had various public appointments. In 2011, Pope Benedict XVI appointed him International Auditor in the then Prefecture for Economic Affairs of the Vatican. In July 2013, the newly appointed Pope Francis chose him to lead the Commission for the reforms of the economic and administrative structures of the Holy See, and was consequently appointed Vice Coordinator of the newly formed Council for the Economy between 2014 and 2020. I would now like to invite Joseph F. Zahra to deliver his keynote speech.
Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, it is undoubtedly a pleasure for me to have the opportunity of addressing a conference on a subject which, in my opinion, is of great importance, as Daniel said even earlier on, for the times that we are living in at the moment. We are living in a period of great challenges, and we need to put even all what we'll be talking about today within a context. And the context is, we mentioned, the pandemic, COVID-19 situation that we are living in. Is it on or is it off? It's off, I say. Some problem. I don't know whether I should start again or...
Yes, you should start again.
I can't continue. Is it on now? I thought it was. Okay. So, the COVID-19 was mentioned earlier on, but, the context that we are living in and the context that business is operating in at the moment is also a very challenging one. A challenging one not only for the people who are actually in business, but also for everyone in society. I would make reference to, what COVID has created, particularly the impact that it has had on inequality, and the fact that, that poverty and marginalization has also been expanding as the pandemic is going on. But it doesn't stop there. I mean, we've been through financial difficulties also before. I mean, going back to to the 2010 date, economic and financial crisis and the debt crisis in Europe in 2011. Situations that have challenged also the various business people that are working with them, but also obviously the others, society in general. I would also like to make reference, to another aspect, which in my opinion has a very important relevance to what we will be talking about today. And this is, social liberalism, that went into, in certain respects, in extreme. We've, in an environment where we've seen that vice has become somewhat more acceptable than virtue, where selfishness, greed, suspicion, conspiracy theories, coercion over, common benefit, these have all become somehow, the topics which, most of us are talking about, and where we realize that, generosity and trust have abated, during also this period. I make, this is important also because, many of us don't make reference to what is sometimes termed as, one of the biggest secrets that of the Catholic Church. And this is, the Catholic social teaching. That is, which should, in actual fact, be a guide and also inform, us, what good government is all about, what good business should be all about, what economic systems, we should operate. And all this, on the basis of the three main pillars of Catholic social teaching, that is the importance of human dignity, the importance of solidarity, and the importance of subsidiarity. The Catholic Church is not there, to impose anything on us, but it is there to, through its mission of accompanying us, humanity in general, whether it's an entrepreneur, whether it's a consumer, whether it's in all its endeavors. We also use the word the common good, a word which unfortunately also has been abused on a number of conditions, and even, when politicians use this word continuously, that we need to work towards the common good. Most of the time we confuse common good with, with the public good, things for the public benefit. But when we are talking about the common good, and we look at, what we're actually, supposed to be referring to, is this summation of the social conditions which allow people, whether as groups or individuals, to reach their fulfillment more fully and more easily. And I like this word fulfillment, that, and this is why the great emphasis that we will be making also throughout my presentation and discussion afterwards on the importance of placing the human person right in the center of all decisions. And to be able to arrive at this common good, there are three essential elements. The first element is we need to respect people. We need to respect persons. And this is, that the people have rights, and we need to respect and protect the rights of the human person. We need also to be conscious of their needs. We have to ensure that the social well-being and the development of humanity, that there has to be, that their needs, the need is that, that people are there also to be supported, to be helped. And the final, the third element is peace. That is, that, that the common good requires an environment which is based on peace, a morally acceptable means of security and defense of people. So people need also to be protected, respecting people, helping people, and protecting people. And after 100 years of the first industrial revolution, and this is, the church with Rerum Novarum, was a milestone as well in guidance in terms of people who, of goodwill, who wanted to, who were interested, obviously, to grow an economy, but make sure that they're working within, the moral, the moral environment which is acceptable. The breakthrough, therefore, we see the breakthrough of Centesimus Annus. And this Saint Pope John Paul II, this encyclical that acts even today, probably even more so today, as a point of reference for anyone, who would like to be in business, but would also to ensure that what the decisions that this person will be taking are the decisions which are moving in the right direction. And what does, the Centesimus Annus say? First of all, it affirms the value of the market economy. And that is an important point. That is, there is the acceptance of the market economy. It establishes also the need to maintain a vibrant and critical interaction between economics, culture, and politics, emphasizing, however, that out of these three, culture is the most important. I would be making reference to this later. And there is another element which, is an underlying element in this encyclical, that the family and life issues are on the list of these social concerns. So, the Catholic Church says that the business economy has many positive aspects. Its basis lies in human freedom, which is exercised in the economic field. So free culture free markets, free polities that create a free society where democracy and market economies go hand in hand, but that they are also risky and can be abused. Economic freedom, and I'm here quoting from Pope Francis in his address to the General Confederation of Italian Industry in 2016, economic freedom, he says, must prevail over the practical freedom of man and over his rights. And the market must not be absolute, but honors the exigencies of justice. You know, this is an important point here, because what we're actually making reference to here is that the problem really is not the economic system, but the problem is people and their culture, which means that the pathologies which eat away at our society and our environment are the fault of ethical and cultural systems and not economic ones. Pope Francis says, you know, we've heard this, it was quite a shock statement way back on the 18th of May, 2013, where, you know, he says this is time of crisis. It's a human crisis. It is the human person that is in crisis. Man himself is in the danger of being destroyed. And this, you know, we have to place this also within, you know, I mean, as a step forward on what Benedict XVI said in what I would also say the masterpiece encyclical, you know, I mean, which refers to economy and society, that the conviction that the economy must be autonomous, that it must be shielded from influences of a moral character, has led man to abuse the economic process in a thorough, destructive way. What we're actually saying is that there is not a dichotomy, that, you know, persons and human beings are on one side and you have an economic system. And when you're in business, while you're you know, in economic activity, you can do things, you know, detached and completely detached from, you know, the humanity that you're actually dealing with. The economy is operated by persons, and therefore it is not autonomous. The monstrosity of social decay, of poverty, of marginalization is a result of human abuse of the economy. Pope Francis points out at one specific way of doing the economy. He says, "Thou shalt not to an economy of exclusion and inequality. Such an economy kills." And Pope Francis again, in his address to the conference to FAO, where he says that the crisis will not be completely over until situations and lying conditions are examined in terms of the human person and human dignity. Our duty is to continue to insist that the human person and human dignity are not simply catchwords, but pillars for creating shared values and structures. And this is part of our responsibility. And part of this responsibility is, and this is again Catholic social thinking, that there has to be the preferential option for the poor. The poor, the option is not limited to material poverty, again, in centesimus annus, since it is well known that there are many others forms of poverty, especially in modern society, which are not only economic, but which are cultural and spiritual poverty as well. You know, the three different forms of poverty that Pope Francis in his message for Lent in 2014, you know, I mean, draw our attention to the fact that besides material poverty, which affects those living in conditions opposed to human dignity, those who lack basic rights and needs such as food, water, hygiene, work, and opportunity to develop and grow culturally, there is moral poverty, which we are severely suffering from today. And this is which consists in the slavery to vice and sin, and also spiritual poverty, that is, which we experience when we turn away from God and reject his love. If we think we don't need God because we believe we can make do on our own. So, and this is, the word Pope Francis and provocation. Pope Francis does in fact provoke us to think. I remember in the first meeting that we had with Pope Francis way back in 2013, as the foundation of Centesimus Annus, our president prepared his usual speech, and he read his usual speech. And it was at that stage that when Pope Francis came up with his reply, his response to the speech, he said, I noticed that the word solidarity hasn't been mentioned once in your speech. And this is a critical point for us to look into. Unless, therefore, Pope Francis is provoking us to rethink and reform the economic system. This is the job, this is the task that he had given Centesimus Annus Foundation way back in 2013. Go back and give me ideas on how we can reform the economic system in a way that will address social problems which are created again by the misuse and the abuse of economic systems. Poverty, marginalization, which result from greed, from selfishness, from dishonesty, from lack of transparency. These are the vices, that in a culture, which is not strong enough, which does not put the human person right in the center, one would simply fall into. But this is done by means of solidarity. Again, in Evangelii Gaudium, which was like, the mission statement of Pope Francis, which allows, he says, all people to become artisans of their destiny. Every person is called now to his also and to her self-fulfillment. Pope Francis, therefore, requests, and this is the challenge, is we need to rethink our society. And to rethink our society, we need to create dignified and well-paying jobs, especially for young people. And new, more inclusive and equitable economic models, which are not aimed at serving the few, but at benefiting ordinary people and society as a whole. This calls for moving from what he calls a liquid economy, that is, with financial products that become complex and even more complex, to a social economy. And again, Pope Francis, in his speech when accepting the International Charlemagne Prize in 2016, and this would involve, he says, passing from an economy which is directed at revenue, profiteering from speculation, and lending at interest to a social economy that invests in persons by creating jobs and providing training. And coming forward to a very recent practical examples that Pope Francis gives on this. This was last week, a number of tweets, from Pontifex, which is, the tweet account of Pope Francis, where, come up with the various points that he made during an address to the popular movements a couple of weeks ago. And, he comes up with practical examples on how this can, in fact, be done. Telecoms, he says, to liberalize access to educational material. Telecom giants to stop preying on human weaknesses, people's vulnerability to make profit. The big laboratories to liberalize patents and allow every human being access to the vaccine. Respect work-life balance human fulfillment with the family and within society. We must adapt our socio-economic models that they have a human heart, since many models have lost it. In more specific and action-based words, what we're actually saying is that developing nations must learn to use these opportunities by making the necessary efforts and sacrifices, by giving more than actually getting back. And to be able to get this, you need political and economic stability. You need the certainty of better prospects for the future. You need to improve people's skills and training. You need to respect towards nature, laudato si, sustainability in social, economic, and environmental interrelations. You need political and corporate leaders who are conscious of their responsibilities and are accountable for what they decide and what they do. And you also need a state that will guarantee basic needs, including affordable housing and healthcare, and which creates an environment which is conducive to development. So, going back from where we actually started, that the main point is the respect of the integrated human person as a person of dignity from work through family, and a person also, a lovely point, remember that Common Good talks about fulfillment, and to be able to achieve fulfillment, you need to have everyone working towards self-fulfillment. The person also as an inventor to improve the quality of life of every person without distinction. The solution is therefore through giving and the gift of ourselves to be able to achieve that common good. And Pope Francis' message again in action, simple terms, but I think they have a lot of relevance to what contemporary world is undergoing today. Business that thinks in terms of the long term and not of speculation and immediate profit. Long-term investment. And long-term investments means that we need also to think intergenerationally. Policies that are intergenerational. That they're not a question of speculating, making money and disappear, but building and contributing to the improvement in society. Growth, the quality of life, profit, which is reinvested in research and development, in invention, in creating also for the improvement, that is the purpose of business, is the common good, and we need to be conscious of this and to develop a culture, therefore, of service to society. And the last 2 points. We have a choice between what is right and what is wrong. As we said, business, the economic system, they're neutral, but they will only take color and go one direction or another based on what the persons who are taking decision choose in terms of what decisions they take. We have a choice between what is right and what is wrong, and it is us who are there to make that choice. Responsibility, accountability on our shoulder. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joe, for his extensive and very valid contribution, which is very insightful. I now invite Dr. Gordon Cordina, who will be joining us virtually, Chairman at Bank of Valletta, to make his first reaction to the speech.
Thank you very much, Daniel. Can I have your confirmation that you are hearing me.
Someone has to reply.
Yes.
Yes, I can hear you. I'm having some problems with camera. Would you mind if I continue on audio only, please?
It's okay.
Thank you very much for the invitation to join this very not only interesting but much needed discussion on ethics in business, which the Gozo Business Chamber is holding. And it was once again a very real pleasure to hear Joseph Zahra very eloquently put forward the main themes which are governing the debate, discussions, and dilemma on the way forward in a planet, in an ecosystem, in an economic system, which is nowadays variously questioning its very own sustainability going into the future if it continues behaving as it has done over the past decade. Clear manifestation of this is the emphasis also at the level of the European Central Bank, to cite an example, where it is directing banks in the entire Eurosystem to conform with new sets of rules that are leading towards an environmental, social, and governance behavior in a way which will lead the financial system to be not only itself sustainable, but also contributing to the sustainability in terms of the environment and in terms of ethical and governance behaviors of its clients and therefore of the rest of the economy. It is an important step, a step which will see radical changes in which banks in the European system will be behaving, and consequently to which their clients will also be behaving in a way which one hopes will drive towards a more ethical, sustainable, and viable economic system that will be ever more centered towards the common good principles which Mr. Zahra has just described to us. It is indeed a new reality nowadays that banks are serving far more deeper instruments than they used to in past years, where they were simply operating and acting as vehicles of monetary and interest rate transmission. The past decade has seen the use of banks to combat financial crime. The next decade will also be seeing the use of banks to inculcate environmental and social and governance principles into the rest of the economic system. So there is a ray of hope in that respect of improvement in years to come. One only has to hope, but not only hope, make the needed concerted and common effort for these objectives to become effective realities. If you will allow me a few more minutes, I will shift my thinking away from that of chairman of the board of the largest bank in the country to that of an economist who is still an academic at heart. Every economics textbooks that our students at any level of study will find will probably have a first sentence in the first chapter, which goes something like, economics is the use of scarce resources to maximize human welfare. So we have a clear realization that we are living in a world where we are limited in what we can achieve, where, as of course also thoroughly explained in the book of the Genesis, we must strive in order to thrive and survive, but we are also rendered responsible for the use of these resources to maximize human welfare. And in that sense, we must understand human welfare across the full range of humanity, which will include not only current, but also future generation born and yet to be born. So that is the noble mission which attracts many of us to the profession. There is, however, then followed typically in the textbook very many chapters which do not focus on the common good, but which equate human welfare to the maximization of individual enjoyment, individual short-term benefit. Typically, then, one finds a final chapter which discusses externalities, the impacts which one's economic behavior could have on another's economic behavior, and we realize that this is a problem in the market which somehow someone must address, and we typically then remain with this big question mark of who, how, when, and using what instrumentality. This is the platform, the basis from which economics must, of course, make a journey towards putting a much larger emphasis on the idea of the maximization of human welfare intended as a common good. And there is a very precise definition, to my mind, what the common good is, in the sense that there is a good, there is a benefit, there is a well-being, which the individual can only enjoy communally, can only enjoy with others, with the rest of society. Such benefit can never be derived simply through one's own existence or maximization of consumption. And of course, we can imagine many dimensions of such communal good. It will exist in social cohesion, in living within a community, productively, actively, with respect that is reciprocal. Communities which can be as large as a nation, but which perhaps even more importantly, need to be founded in the smallest of communities, which is the family. The family is indeed a common good which the economic system must prize, possibly above anything else. There is, of course, health. Health needs to be enjoyed communally. It is not something which can be ever fully enjoyed individually while the rest of society is deprived of this essential element. The ever more important dimensions of the environment and climate change, where we are basically making individual profit while imposing costs for which nobody is paying, and therefore for which the economy is not really caring. Those costs are now becoming a reality to each and every one of us, and are compelling us to take actions which are far quicker and must be far more drastic than those which we would have taken had we taken notice of this problem and done something about it decades ago. Other elements of communal good, and here I of course salute Gozo in the context of the generation of art, creativity, its various forms in music, culture, and other elements through which this communal good can be enjoyed. Is the economic system giving enough of this, which at the end of the day, to my mind, represents the apex where individual fulfillment in common happiness, in the common good, can ever be attained. Given all this, we must realize that the market is an instrument. The market, through the forces of demand and supply and consequent prices, which direct the allocation of resources, will generate goods and services to service individual needs. But left to its own, it will definitely fail us. It will not be effective to generate all those elements of common good that we need at this stage, not just to achieve fulfillment, but nowadays, even more basically, to allow our society to continue to survive in the face of important challenges that we are currently being tasked to look into. If I may have a few more moments, I would also like to give some attention to the important element of instrumentality. How shall we get there? How shall we reform the system? And typically, in economics speak, there would be 4 ways to address these market failures. One would be through education and human formation. This would be the ideal, of course, to have a set of shared values enforced through voluntary individual behavior as a way of normally behaving that is ethical, where producer respects consumer, where consumer also not only demands but respects and appreciates the kind of product and service being received, where everyone from consumer to producer is behaving sustainably with respect to the environment, with respect to those which are less fortunate in terms of the financial and human capital which they possess. This is the long-term task, to educate and to form human beings in an ethical behavioral mode. But until we get there, we all need to appreciate that we need to either regulate and regulate effectively, which in a way which is also monitored and enforced so that ethics are really inculcated in the system. We can produce also incentives, financial incentives to promote economic behavior that is ethical, and where needed, there needs also to be applied financial dissuasion or disincentives so that behavior that is not consistent with ethics is dissuaded and does not take place. But here I'd like to ask an even more fundamental question, perhaps for further discussion. Is ethical behavior something which we must respect as a constraint, as a minimum way of doing business? Or should it become effectively something to maximize? No producer needs to be directed in a way to maximize profits, or consumer needs to be directed in a way to maximize own individual welfare? Should it be the case that we need to reform the rules of the game such that ethics would also become the factor to maximize in our behavior, not merely as a way which is constraining us in what we can and cannot do? But there again, that requires a fundamental change in values, it requires a fundamental change in behaviors and culture, and it also requires our governments to change the rules of the game, which creates economic frameworks conducive to such outcomes. And therefore, the other point, which was of course very well presented by Joseph, it cannot happen in any one dimension. Ethical behavior needs top-down approaches complemented by bottom-up attitudes, which are mutually self-reinforcing. Top-down from the highest levels of supranational authorities, and bottom-up through our daily, everyday lives, where through our examples, influencing the circle of our communities in which we are operating in, we create these mutual waves of ethical behavior, which can then be multiplied in a world where such ethics are ever in more demand, but of course only if complemented effectively from a top-down behavior. Long-term thinking not only of today, but also of future generations. The unborn human beings deserve a weight, deserve a consideration just as much as we do who are living on this world right now. Leading to one final thought about externalities, which is again a final question that I'd like to pose for possible later discussion. When the multitude was fed and satiated, was the food multiplied in volume? Therefore, the typical multiplier effect in economics, where you tend to satisfy people by producing more? Or was the miracle actually even a stronger one, whereby with the limited resources that were available, the entire multitude was made happy and kept satisfied, which is perhaps the even greater challenge which through ethical behavior we can aspire to achieve in order to attain the real welfare, the real well-being of generations current and future. And with that thought, I thank you and look forward to the further discussions to come.
Thank you, Dr. Cordina. It was very interesting also the putting economics in the gospel, but a lot of thought-provoking questions which I really hope we will be taking on in our discussion further on. Thank you, Dr. Cordina, for your very insightful comments. I now invite Fr Joseph Hili, who will be joining us virtually from Milan, to react to the keynote intervention.
Hello, everybody. Thanks a lot for the invitation, and thanks a lot for the opportunity. Thanks to Professor Zahra for his keynote speech, which is very inspiring and leaves a lot of important thoughts on which we can work. I think that along the years, we human beings tried to go for our fulfillment, as Professor Zahra said. But maybe we thought that we can do this thing going for one value, and we say, if we chose one value, we have to do it in expense of the other. So I think that this fulfillment during the years has had this line of thought. But one of the most important points that I think Pope Francis in the encyclical letter Laudato Si tells us is that everything is connected. And the COVID experience tells us so, because I think what happened in one country had an effect in another country and in all the world. So I think we have to start from the point of view that it is possible to renew our methods and change the way we do business, but let us also not deceive ourselves by saying that since business is a model, changing economic model, and bringing this change will bring a change in the way we live. We must go deep into our analysis and be sincere with ourselves. And what we have, even as Pope Francis tells in the Laudato Si, is what we see is an anthropological crisis where the human being is not satisfied and always wants more. Then that more, it is important that becomes, I want it all and I want it now. So this desire in the human being cannot be forgotten when we look at our society and when we try to ask ourselves if there is an ethical way to do business. What we have to do, I think, is a shift from the technocratic paradigm. Pope Francis rails and speaks against the technocratic paradigm for its tendency to wrap up our perception of reality and thereby leads us towards making mistakes, both moral and technical, in our interactions with the world. The technocratic paradigm tends to see all of the reality as a problem awaiting for an application of scientific and technological power, thus deluding us into thinking we can become powerful enough and wise enough to apply our power to all things. So this paradigm tends to see all of reality as a raw material awaiting human use, rather than a living reality, intrinsically valuable in its own right and therefore worth of our respect. So the technocratic paradigm should not be confused with science and technology themselves, which the Pope encourages and is thankful for. But this paradigm is rather an abuse of science and technology, and an application of them beyond their proper domains, raising them to being a totalizing worldview with no room for other forms of thought. We have, therefore, to make this shift, because economically, the technocratic paradigm also tends to concentrate power among those who control financial and political resources. Each further development of the economy under technocratic paradigm generates new products and technological marvels, but only supplies them to the wealthy, while enriching the even wealthier elites who control the financial and the political resources in the first place. So the technocratic paradigm encourages social stratification and inequality. This is the mainstream line of how we used to see economy and how we used to do business. But a shift is possible, I think. And something is happening, because finally politics and society are appropriating the true idea that ethics and sustainability are at the opposite of the growth. This conference, for example, is an example of what is happening. Doing business ethically is the root of a sustained economics expansive cycle that produces useful quality instead of harmful quantity. So a sustainable economy is not a system that limits itself to producing well-being, so as not to go beyond the limits of nature. On the contrary, it is an economy that harmonizes the values that can be measured, those measured in GDP, for example, with other non-calculable values such as health, legality, personal fulfillment, family, other surroundings. This is the result of a more competitive system, because the true foundations are not only just low in production costs. The creativity of the worker, the generosity of the respected surroundings, the environment, the feeling of happiness, all these elements give much more impetus than a frenetic search for cutting production costs. So consequently, as Professor Cordina also said, the perception of the financial system is changing. For too long, together with all the others, finance has treated the values of the common good as a trade-off, as a reservoir of additional costs that depress competitiveness, linked to very noble objectives, but to the entrusted to a philanthropic aspect of the company or of the business. Because we also always thought that business is business, and here values seemed completely extraneous to economic mechanisms. So to conclude, I think that today the same system sees in the attention of a company, of a way to do business, the common good, and it can be seen as a factor of competitiveness, solidity, duration of investment. And studies are telling us that young people give big value about how the product was produced and how the production company looks at the social dimension in their choices when they are consuming. But obviously, returning to the question, I think that this conference imposes, is there an ethical way to do business? I think yes, there is an ethical way, and it is not a utopia, because what Professor Zahra showed us is an example. But we must never forget to do a question and answer it. I think we must ask, we do business for who? Who can bring success to my business? And the pronoun is who, not what. I think we shall make this question and put who, not what, because we are not in the search for business models, new business models, because those business models exist and are successful, even ethical ones. But business and an ethical one must have the person as a central component. And so, for example, having 60% of the Maltese youths who would rather move elsewhere in Europe has to be also worrying for a Maltese business and has to put questions, we do business for who? And who can bring success to my business? To conclude, I think that we need change, we want change, and we seek change. But the problem arises when we realize that we lack adequate and inclusive answers to many of our current problems. Given the urgent need to come up with answers, I think that we have to look to that new paradigm that Pope Francis proposes in the Laudato Si, which is the integral ecology, and tell to each other that an integral economy, integral business is possible. We as a church, we as population, as a society, what can we do? I think it is indispensable to promote and support leadership groups capable of shaping culture. We have to initiate processes, and it's processes, not half-baked solutions, because we need to be a person, we need to be a society that, as the two speakers before me said, have a long-term vision. Then we have to broaden our horizons to see how businesses which put the ethics at the center of their project work and are succeeding in all of the world. And at last but not least, I think we have to build common bonds, which is imperative if we want to do an ethical business. So every effort to organize, care for, and improve our common home, if it is to be meaningful, will also demand a change in lifestyle, models of production and consumption, and establish structures of how we do business, but obviously beginning from the human person itself, because it is he who has to take decisions, who can change the business model, and who can put ethics as a priority when doing business. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Father Joseph. It is interesting how each speaker is bringing thought-provoking questions to each contribution. So now I invite our third panelist, Mario Galea, to make his intervention.
Your Excellency, thank you, Joe. Thank you, Daniel. I start from 2 points that the President made in the beginning of this session, which are 2 jewels of wisdom, I call them, from Pope Francis, which are the reference to ethics having to come from within, and the other one is going against the grain. I am an accountant and an auditor who practiced for 40 years or so, now morphed into a company director who sits on a variety of businesses. So I come to you in my reaction to these thought-provoking speeches that I've heard from the practice, everyday practice of trying to turn these magnificent thoughts about ethical business into practice. It's a challenge. I honestly find it difficult to transpose these thoughts into reality. I'm not saying they are not transposable. I'm not saying they are not possible to live out, but I'm afraid to say the reality is I don't see them in boardrooms. I see many good people. I work with many good people. I work with many people with good intentions. But when you try to extract the value that really this practice of ethics in business should have, I always return home disappointed. We need help in boardrooms. We need a lot of help in boardrooms. And we need more people who can deliver the message during the work that we do and leave an impact. The only way we can leave an impact by having more people in boardrooms with this kind of mentality. It is extremely important that I leave this message today, especially that I am speaking in a business environment, within an ecclesiastical environment, which are two very good, a very nice combination. We talked about reforming the economy. I think we need to reform the mindset of us people in the boardrooms, of us people in the business. We need to redefine the meaning of opportunity. Opportunity in boardrooms has become opportunism, to the exclusion of everything else. We need to define honesty. I suffer. I see a lot of good intentions, but I struggle to see honesty. Honesty has been given a new definition. Honest with myself. What is honesty? What is good for me is honest. What's good for me is honest. It's amazing. You experience it every day. We need to redefine conscience. We've muffled conscience. We've buried it. I don't always believe what I hear around me in boardrooms. I believe that people are much better than what they make themselves out to be interpreted as. I'm sure that if we manage to extract the importance of, as Joe mentioned, right and wrong, let's have 2 minutes, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, because thank God boards are getting mixed, which is a good thing. Let's have 2 minutes thinking whether this is right. Whether this is right to those out there. Because unfortunately, in the boardrooms, we're always enclosed within four walls, like the conclave. Four walls, always. With very limited agendas. I don't see anything to do with common good in the agendas. I see many positive things, by the way, because the positive things that come out of boardrooms are undeniable. This is why we have a good economy in the country. This is why we have a good economy in the West and expanding into the East, because boardrooms are doing a very good job. But unfortunately, it is a bit inward-looking more than outward-looking as we wish it to be. We need to define the boundaries of need. Need has lost its meaning. Need of who? Whose need? We are concentrating more on our needs than on the needs out there. We need to draw a line to understand what is real needs, authentic needs, and what is greed. We need to redefine neighborly love. I don't think there is sufficient love in boardrooms. We need to redefine politics. Politics equals sacrifice and servitude, and not providing opportunities for the few. And then in the few, in the boardrooms, we try to be part of the few at the expense of the many. We need the redefinition of supply and demand. We've heard a lot of economics today. I love economics, but I'm an accountant and an auditor, so I have a limit on my understanding of economics. But supply and demand, are we supplying what is being demanded? Are we supplying only to meet needs? Or are we supplying to create false wealth? Look around you. Do we need all this that is going on around us? Do we need all these enormous projects around us? Is there a demand? Why are we supplying them? Why are we producing them if we don't need them? Can we draw a line as to, I've had enough, now I'm comfortable, I've had enough? Why is it that we continue to need more and more and more and more? It's like, it's a vicious circle, it's never ending, it's always going around, and we just need more and more and more to the exclusion of the rest. Can I not leave something to the others? Can I not leave and develop and leave space for others to develop their own thing, do their own thing, be businessmen like me? And then we need to return to the basics. Like Joe and Gordon mentioned the economic principles of economics, I mentioned the principles of companies and the principles of what a director should do. A director, originally in the books that we used to study, should work in the interest, I'm going to skip the company, of the shareholder. Today, we need to think differently. We need to change that focus. We need to think in the interest of the public. We need to think in the interest of all stakeholders. It's mentioned before me, I'm reacting positively to it. We need to think in the interest of creditors, of taxpayers, of employees, of buyers, of sellers, of society next door to me, how much we kill them with our affluent, how much we kill them with our whatever we throw in the air, how much we really produce the good products, how much we give good service, how much we give value for money. It's endless. We need to redefine success. What is success? And I'm closing in on finishing my contribution. Success is, we have the wrong impression of success. That's what I see. So, because we have not been able to decide for ourselves and behave properly in the interest of the common good, it has been defined and imposed on us. One reference which Gordon made, which may have been overseen because he mentioned it in passing, is the concept of reporting on ESG. If I were to quote from the supervisory priorities of the regulators as dictated by the ECB, that is from the European Union, and this is happening in other countries and groups as well in the world, ESG, environment, social, governance, is given high importance on our agendas in the boardrooms. We are watched. We are told what to do. Another thing that has been defined and which is already being put into practice is the integrated reporting. My life is reporting. Up to now, we report only numbers. Almost meaningless numbers for the purpose of our subject today. In fact, the numbers that we report them in such a way that you don't understand them. They become too difficult to understand. So we've even lost the meaning of the numbers. What the shareholder or what the stakeholder or whoever is interested in is everyone, we're all having fun, looking after ourselves, who cares about the rest? That's all. So, what is being now recommended and imposed is integrated reporting. Integrated reporting, where a company has to take into consideration when reporting not only the financial side of things, but it needs to declare its strategy. It needs to declare how it does governance. It needs to declare how it performed. Did it profiteer or did it make profits due to it? Did it exploit somebody in some backwaters place in the world, or did it apply proper ways and methods of production? Prospects, how do you intend to go ahead? Financial, I mentioned. Manufactured, the use of the resources, which Gordon and Joe mentioned. The intellectual, how much are we giving space for intellect within our workforce to come up, to develop, to contribute? The human aspect, what did we do to promote and encourage the human aspect, the heart, rather than the brain or the mind? The social and relationships that we have with the world. I was in a meeting this week or last week. No, I was correcting some minutes this week where we decided to do some CSR, corporate social responsibility. And the minute went like this. We decided to give so much money to this, that, and that. And the managing director emphasized to put this in the website in order to improve our brand. I send the minutes back, not accepted. If this is why we decided, then we might as well not give the money. It means nothing. It's not going to do any good. We are only trying to take pleasure out of it. We're not giving anything. It's a shame. I'm sorry, it's a shame. I send the minutes back. Now I wait for the next board meeting, and I will see whether they change it, because I am a non-executive. I don't have any power. I only fulfill non-executive positions. And then there is included in the integrated reporting our attention to nature. It's there. specifically, it's got to be there. Our attention to nature. What are we doing to look after what is around us and what we're going to leave to posterity? Integrated reporting is not a theory. Please take me seriously. Integrated reporting, statistically, there are already 75 countries exercising it. There are 2,500 organizations producing integrated reporting, and there are 40 stock exchanges taking integrated reporting into account, because there are investors who are watching and directing their investments towards companies who adopt this system, this method. And these people are looking for what? They are looking for value creation. We need, therefore, to not only redefine those things that I mentioned, we need to also redefine the meaning of value. Value coming in, value going out. Value going where? We need to redefine. And investors, let's call it like this, capital providers are looking for value creation, and they are investing there. And there are also statistics, which I don't have here with me, but I am sure I read, where investors or capital providers are placing and directing their capital towards companies who embrace ESG. In regulated sectors, it is imposed on us. In unregulated sectors, that is not financial, not insurance, or not investment, they are voluntarily adopting these ESG rules or ESG prescriptions, and therefore they are given more value, these companies, even on stock exchanges. It's beginning to be observed. Two last little things. As an accountant and auditor, in 2014, there was a very big audit reform in the European Union, which was put into effect even in Malta, transposed fully in 2016, where us, because we played a part, us auditors and accountants, we played a part to where we are today, to this difficult situation we are in today, because we did turn blind eyes to things, yes, if not also helped along. So what is being imposed on us because of our lack of behavior? We lost self-regulation 20 years ago. Because of that, it is imposed on us that we have to insert societal objectives into the way we do our work. We have to show and prove that, not the cliché of public interest, we have to show in our day-to-day work how we are taking into account our societal role. And one other last point is that, unfortunately, up to about 10 years ago, I was proud to say, when I used to go and participate in lobby groups or groups in the EU, or technical groups in the EU, as part of my career, we used to look at the Americas, or at America, as a place where things are imposed on people, where things are prescribed to people. People are told what to do. In the EU, until 10 years ago or so, we used to go and pride ourselves on being principles-based. Where are we today? Europe has become like America, because we can't do it well ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Mario. Thank you all. I apologize that we will not have time for the discussion we envisaged, but the speakers were so good that in their thought-provoking questions. But please leave your comments. As I said, this is a discussion which we as a chamber want to also see in the future. and to continue this as a space of dialogue. So I apologize for not being able to take your questions, but we will take on your comments and will open this as a floor for discussion in the future. As I said in the beginning, we want to create this as a space of dialogue. However, I want to sum up some important points that we saw in all the three speeches and would like to point out to the definition of the common good and its essential elements that was pointed out by Joe, the rights, the needs, the peace, the critical interaction between economics, culture, and politics, as indicated by Centesimus Annus, the fact that economic freedom must not prevail over the practical freedom of the human being and his or her rights, the need to rethink and reform the economic system, and the need to adapt our socio-economic models to address the needs of the human being, and that the main purpose of business should be the common good. I think that through his intervention, Joseph Zahra provided us with much needed pointers, which also were then taken up by the panel. In that Dr. Gordon Cordina, he first put on his hat as a chairman of BOV, but then as an economist, in which he highlighted that the economics, we need to have a holistic economics. We need to see what is the common good. It's not simply the numbers. And this element was taken over also by Fr Joseph Hili, where he pointed out the centrality of the human person in all that we do. And finally, Mario Galea, in his intervention, he gave us the practical, what actually happens. And he said, it's an item which struck me most. Sometimes in the boardroom, it's not opportunity, but opportunism. But what is the element that united all the speakers that we had is the centrality of the human person, the need to fetch the common good. As I said, the time that we had does not give us the opportunity to open the floor for the question, but please, your comments will be taken on board. As I said, we want to open this for the future as a space of dialogue. So I would now like to invite the Bishop, Monsignor Anton Tauma, to make the concluding intervention for this conference.
I just want to spend a word of thanks to all of you. Thank you, Joe. Thanks, Daniel. Thank you, Mr. Zahra. Thank you, Mr. Galea. Thanks to Father Joe Hili and to all those who intervened in this conference. Thank you for coming too and for joining us even online. Since we are here in our environment at the Curia, I would firstly invite ourselves, because sometimes, and Mr. Zahra is aware of it, sometimes even within the church, we are carried away with the way how the world reasons, how materialism speeds and runs towards well-being or forced well-being. But we are all aware that if economy is not ethical, it becomes suicidal. And it's, in the words of Pope Francis, especially in Fratelli Tutti, he explicitly shows this. So I invite, first of all, ourselves and all those who work within the church and within church organizations to follow, to reflect upon the conclusions, upon these thoughts that we had the opportunity to ponder on today. And I hope that in the future, even in this same environment, we can hold other conferences, other similar conferences, which can help all of us to translate the gospel precepts into practice. Thank you very much, all of you. Thank you.
My concluding remarks. We have a debt of gratitude to our speakers today, our keynote speaker, Joseph Zahra, Dr. Gordon Cordina, Fr Joseph Hili, and Mario Galea. As I said before, their interventions and insights will surely provide good points for reflection on what economy we want in the future and on how ethical conduct in business should be structured. I would like to thank those present, the staff at the chamber, for their patience they had with me in the organization of this conference, and our technical crew, and also those who followed us through the virtual platform on social media. A special thanks goes to all our partners on the event, Bank of Valletta, the Foundation Centesimus Annus Pro Pontifice, and the Diocese of Gozo, which has hosted us today. May I remind you that this initiative was also supported through the Gozo NGO Assistance Scheme, which is a funding program for voluntary organizations on the island of Gozo. I wish you all a good evening.